Hi, I'm Keek. Welcome to Countdown to Catastrophe, a video series where I explore the historical processes that brought us to our present day predicament. Today, we're looking at how it came to be that the American Revolution is looked at as this popular uprising that resulted in the codification of democratic ideals, when actually, as we see in the previous videos, which you can watch here, this was not really the case. We have to start with how it is that there was an uprising at all. Really, the methods of the first revolutionary organizations were twofold. First, they used violence to instill fear in the population and stamp out any anti-revolutionary sentiment. Those early revolutionary organizations engaged in acts of uncivil disobedience. William Polk, author of this book, which everyone should read, calls these early organizations unequivocally terrorist organizations. They engaged in a concerted, violent effort to terrorize and kill loyalists, most visibly in popular American depictions of the Revolutionary War with the tar and featherings. But these were extremely widespread and resulted in tens of thousands of loyalists fleeing to Canada. And then the flip side of this was a massive propaganda campaign. Paul Revere and Benjamin Franklin created artwork that depicted the 13 colonies as one united people in the face of oppression of the British Empire. In fact, the first known political cartoon to be printed in an American newspaper was Benjamin Franklin's Join or Die piece. As you can see, this piece depicts a disjointed snake representing each one of the 13 colonies. Thomas Paine's Common Sense was this revolutionary pamphlet calling for the people of the 13 colonies to fight for an egalitarian government opposing the hierarchical oppressiveness of the British Empire. And it's no accident that the Declaration of Independence deems as inalienable rights life, liberty, and the pursuit of happiness. By the time you get to the Constitution, the pursuit of happiness is replaced with property. This populist rhetoric would be reproduced throughout history, in school books, in Hollywood. George Washington, known to the Seneca tribe as Town Destroyer, who owned more than 100 enslaved individuals by the time of his death, still has the cherry tree myth told about him in books. That story, by the way, created by a biographer who said that he came up with it in order to sell more books. In 1774, Jefferson, who owned over 600 people over the course of his lifetime, described British imperial policies towards the 13 colonies as, quote, a deliberate and systematical plan of reducing us to slavery.
This country was founded by slave owners who wanted to be free.
As we've noted, the system that Jefferson played a massive part in creating excluded swaths of the population, including the actually enslaved people, and gave primacy to the voice of capital. In 2000, in The Patriot, starring Mel Gibson, an American soldier is depicted as being pushed to join the revolution on account of his horror at the Nazi-like atrocities perpetrated by the British Empire against those poor American settlers. James W. Lowen points out that you can read the nationalism that's embedded in our American history textbooks on the cover just by looking at their names and the pictures that are depicted. He talks about how there are books with names like The Great Republic, The American Pageant, Land of Promise, Triumph of the American Nation. And those names have behind them f***ing bald eagles and the Grand Canyon. And this stems from the virtual deification of the Founding Fathers that goes all the way back to the beginning. James Madison noted that it was impossible for the man of pious reflection not to perceive in the Constitution a finger of that almighty hand. At the Constitutional Convention, a Federalist stated that the, quote, unexpected harmony of the Federal Convention must be attributed to the special influence of heaven. The dominating theory surrounding the creation of the Constitution in the 19th century was best illustrated by George Bancroft, who wrote, quote, by calm meditation and friendly counsels, the American people had prepared a constitution which in the union of freedom with strength and order excelled every one known before, and which secured itself against violence and revolution by providing a peaceful method for every needed reform. The deification goes back even further in history. In a farewell speech, Ronald Reagan described the United States as a shining city on a hill. attributing the phrase to John Winthrop, who he called a freedom man, who came to the United States, quote, looking for a home that would be free.
The past few days, when I've been at that window upstairs, I've thought a bit of the shining city upon a hill. The phrase comes from John Winthrop, who wrote it to describe the America he imagined.
John Winthrop, of course, was an early English settler who helped found the Massachusetts Bay Colony. 1 year before he coined the term, that colony created its Great Seal, depicting an indigenous person with a bow and arrow and a scroll coming out of his mouth, and written on it were the words, "Come over and help us." This deification can be found throughout history. Nearly 300 years later, the seal of the veterans of the Spanish-American War would be created depicting a naked woman kneeling in front of an armed soldier and a sailor with a US battleship in the background. This deification allows scholars to look at the project of the American Revolution as one innately altruistic with secondary trespasses. In other words, the Constitution is a holy document that can't be touched or criticized because it's perfect in every way, and in ways that it was imperfect, it had within it the mechanism to change it to make it more perfect. The institution of slavery just happened to be one of those things that had to be worked out. For that reason, Pulitzer Prize-winning historian Gordon Wood,
you're going to be in here regurgitating Gordon Wood,
unequivocally stated in a 1999 lecture, within 3 or 4 decades surrounding the War of Independence, America experienced the birth of democracy, broadly speaking, in all of its manifestations. Oh my God, what is he talking about? Well, Wood, a Pulitzer Prize-winning historian, acknowledges the worst of history and merely sort of gives more attention to other parts. Depictions of the revolution on television are able to completely ignore those parts altogether. Motivated by profit, television series are prone to ignore the more controversial. In the end, what we're left is a completely sanitized depiction of history. The 7-part miniseries John Adams, starring Paul Giamatti and Laura Linney, based on the Pulitzer Prize-winning biography of John Adams, written by David McCullough, entirely ignores the relationship of key revolutionaries to the institution of slavery. In a conversation between Abigail Adams and George Washington, Adams asked rhetorically if British brutality in the colonies is God's punishment for the sin of slavery. Washington replies whimsically, "I cannot say." No mention is made of the fact that Washington was a virulent racist and a brutal slave owner who would sell enslaved people to the West Indies for escape attempts. In a scene where John Adams and Benjamin Franklin are reading an early copy of the Declaration of Independence, they put the question of slavery to Jefferson, who replies, quote, "Slavery is an abomination and must be loudly proclaimed as such. But I own that neither I nor any man has any immediate solution to the problem." Nothing is said of the fact that Jefferson was a slave owner. And even further, what this depiction ignores is what Jefferson actually wrote on the topic. In his notes on the state of Virginia, he offers as a solution mass deportation of enslaved individuals in order to prevent miscegenation. He's a fucking racist. The narrative that we're sold about the American Revolution functions in society as the modern day noble lie. The noble lie was a concept outlined by Plato in the Republic. Plato came from an aristocratic family that was unseated by democracy in Athens, and we can see in his writings that he's very much so opposed to the democratic process. In his view, the masses were akin to cave dwellers, and the only people who should have the right to lead them were people who he called philosopher kings. Individuals who from a very young age received an extremely high level of education and would be sort of bred to rule. In order to justify their rule, Plato argued through Socrates that what was needed was a noble fable or a noble lie. That lie would legitimize the need for these philosopher kings in a way for the masses to understand. As you'll see in this clip of The Dark Knight, Harvey Dent, a district attorney who snaps and starts murdering people. At the moment of his death, Commissioner Gordon and the Batman decide to cleanse that history in order to legitimize the actions of the state.
God needs its true hero. You either die a hero, or you live long enough to see yourself become the villain. I can do those things, because I'm not a hero. Not like that. I killed those people. That's what I can be.
No, you can't. You're not.
I'm whatever Gotham needs me to be.
Philosopher Slavoj Žižek
invisible transcendence
notes, if the ordinary public were to learn how corrupt was or is the very core of our legal system, then everything would have collapsed, so we need a lie to maintain order. If at its root, the United States and the American Revolution was divine and its purpose transcendent, then the hierarchical system of political economy that was established must then also share those traits. That our system is rigidly hierarchical is legitimized by a sort of theological transcendence. We see the aversion towards popular input into the American government from the very beginning. Madison wrote that he feared the disturbance of the public tranquility by interesting too strongly the public passions. In the now infamous excerpts of Hillary Clinton's paid speeches to Goldman Sachs, the world has been given a brief glimpse into how the noble lie operates ideologically at the highest echelons of power. Quote, if everybody's watching, you know, all of the backroom discussions and the deals, you know, then people get a little nervous, to say the least. So you need both a public and a private position. This point of view was repeatedly articulated by the powerful, particularly after the 1960s. Noam Chomsky often refers to the Trilateral Commission's 1975 study, The Crisis of Democracy, which said that the 1960s brought about excess of democracy. That was the cause of a deficit of governability. Now this concludes part 1 of our series. We're going to take a couple weeks off. Please like, comment, and subscribe. In part 2, we'll be addressing themes of race, capitalism, the rise of modernity through the 19th century to the early 20th century. If you're interested in that, please like, comment, and subscribe for more content and so that publishers will look twice at my book. Oh, I want to get my book published.